Well, good morning, and thank you so much, Elder, for starting us off in a good way with that prayer. And thank you all for being here today. I think this is an amazing occasion. We had another announcement much like this yesterday with Sutina. We're following up today. So thank you, Tapi, Elder Francis Butch-Wolf-Legg, for the prayer to the Creator. I'd also like to begin by acknowledging that we're gathered on Treaty 7 territory, the sacred ancestral home of the Siksika Nation and the Blackfoot Confederacy, who have a long-standing and enduring history with this land. The Blackfoot people have always lived and hunted on this traditional territory. And I'm grateful to Chief Ulrich Crowfoot and Council for being here today and partnering with us on this announcement. As you can see, I'm joined by Minister Dan Williams, who has an incredibly important mandate to continue building Alberta's recovery-focused model for addiction and mental health care. You'll see also we have our Minister of Seniors, Community and Social Services, Jason Nixon, and our Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Services, Mike Ellis. Am I missing any of my other ministers? Okay. And we also have Joseph Scow. He's our Minister of Tourism and Sport, but he's here today because he is also the MLA representing Carson Siksika. The illness of addiction continues to have devastating impacts across Alberta. While each death is a tragedy for the families and loved ones left behind, entire communities are often left grieving. This is something First Nations know all too well. First Nations people across Alberta face some of the highest risks for overdose deaths, and access to land-based, culturally safe addiction treatment services is often limited or missing completely. This is unacceptable. We must do more to enable people to get the help they need to pursue recovery. And that's why our government is actively working with First Nations to address these challenges and fund these projects directly. Today, I'm proud to announce that Alberta's government is signing a memorandum of understanding with Siksika Nation to develop a new recovery community on Siksika lands. With an investment of up to $30 million in capital, this new 75-bed recovery community will provide holistic addiction treatment services for up to 300 people every year. And once building is complete, Alberta's government will also fully fund the operations of the recovery community so that no person is forced to pay out of pocket for life-saving care. Today's MOU marks a milestone in our government's relationship with Siksika Nation. Developing a recovery community with Siksika Nation and other First Nations is an important step towards increasing access to long-term addiction treatment that meets the needs of First Nations. Today's announcement is the most recent example of our ongoing efforts to work side by side with First Nations. As I mentioned, yesterday we announced a recovery community to build with Sutina, and work is already underway with Kainai, the Blood Tribe, and Enoch Cree Nation to build recovery communities on their lands. This collaboration is part of a monumental shift in the way addiction treatment is provided in Alberta, where everyone is able to get help and support that they deserve to pursue recovery. I wholeheartedly believe there is a better life for everyone who chooses recovery, and that recovery is possible for everyone. I look forward to working with our partners at Siksika Nation in the months ahead as this new facility takes shape. Before closing, I'd like to once again thank Chief Crowfoot for partnering with us on this important project. Chief.
Sure. Very happy to. Well, thank you, Premier, for those comments, and thank you again, Chief and Council who are here, for the work you have done leading up to this moment. This is an incredibly important moment for the Government of Alberta partnering with Siksika on what is going to be the start of the Alberta model, recovery-oriented systems of care, where we are focusing on working and integrating directly with local communities, in this case, partnering with First Nation Siksika to build this recovery center. So this memorandum of understanding is incredibly important for us moving forward. Before I move on, I want to thank Buck, particularly, Councillor Buck Breaker, for the work, where is he, behind me on my right, for the work he's done on the Calgary Public Safety and Emergency Response Task Force. I'm going to be chairing that task force going forward. I know my colleague, Minister Ellis, has already played an important part in getting us to this place we're at today. And it's going to be partnerships like this that create success for us in our communities. Our vision in the province of Alberta is to see a place where every single Albertan has immediate access to treatment and the opportunity to pursue recovery as soon as they desire it. And so this is particularly the case. We see disproportionately First Nation communities are affected by the deadly disease of addiction within the province of Alberta. And it's our responsibility, I believe it's my responsibility morally, for this government to step in and support immediately without waiting for the federal government to find these supports directly on the land, directly connected to the people of Siksika to make sure that they are supported right away. For many people, this is the only opportunity they have to find some sort of support when they're drowning in this disease and this illness of addiction, to find that support through holistic, integrated community is incredibly important. So our vision here is to make sure that we have a holistic, long-term, and supportive, safe environment for those who are getting treatment for addiction. And that's important because addiction doesn't just affect the physical health and the well-being of an individual. It also impacts relationships, it affects the work, it often erodes a person's sense of self and connection to family and community and to their heritage. And that's why it's so important that this facility is going to be integrated directly with and operated with the community of Siksika. And so we're going to be working on rebuilding those connections, creating healthy communities amongst our partners, and it's going to be an important step forward. This is one of 11 facilities across the province that we're building. This MOU represents the work that we're going to be starting immediately afterwards, right after this meeting, to find a site, to build out this facility, and we're hoping that we're expected to start in early 2024 to be complete if we're lucky and keep moving forward at the pace that we have been. And this means hundreds of lives and hundreds of Siksika members are going to get treatment. Of course, this will be open to all members of the public as well. Anyone that needs support in this province, the government is committed to supporting them. So in conclusion, I just want to say how grateful we are to be signing this with the Chief, with Council, the work they've done. This is the start of a long relationship that I know will be productive to make sure that the Alberta model, where we're looking at recovery from addiction as the priority of this province, is going to be something that we can uphold and support our First Nation members in the province as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Chief. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Okay, Nistwanako Nukske Stomach, Chief Ulrich, Crowfoot, Siksika Nation. I'd like to thank the Premier as well as the ministers for working with Siksika on these initiatives. The council sitting behind me, that's our Public Safety Task Force at Siksika. When Maslow came to Siksika back in the early 1900s, he developed his hierarchy of needs based on the ways of Siksika people. And some of those hierarchies is, you have to have safety, security, shelter. You have to have those basic needs met first. If you don't have those basic needs met first, a lot of times you're not worried about, an investment plan or a long-term future. You're trying to get through today. And our safety team behind us is working with the ministers here and other ministers within the province to help create a safer Siksika. And a safer Siksika also makes our people feel that sense of safety. And a lot of times drug use is a side effect of trauma that took place, or not feeling safe, or not feeling secure. And Siksika is the second largest First Nation in Canada. And we're only a few kilometers away from Calgary. So, if you have an area that you don't have a policing, you don't have a public safety area, you have drug dealers, and you have people that come from larger municipalities such as Calgary, Lethbridge, all over Canada, and they feel safe in these areas that they know that there's no policing. And so these are some of the initiatives that we're working with the province of Alberta. We've had far too many people from Siksika, and not just Siksika, but southern Alberta, pass away in the last few years of overdose, of drug abuse, of alcoholism. And this issue is not going to go away. It's not one that we can put our head in the sand and hope that it's going to go away on its own. This is a worldwide pandemic. And, we see our people, a lot of people at Siksika and the nations that he mentioned, Sarsi and Enoch and the Blood Tribe. A lot of times it's getting into those facilities in Calgary, we have large wait times. So this is why having that facility on the nation, will help our people to get in those facilities in that critical window that they need to get into that facility. But like the minister mentioned, it will also be open for southern Alberta as well. So, I'm a strong believer is the stronger we make Siksika, the safer we make Siksika at home, it's going to go outward. The safer Calgary's going to be. We get those public safety, we get those police, and we get those building blocks in place. This is one big step towards a lot of steps of building that strong foundation that we're building at Siksika. A strong, sound foundation that our people can feel safe. Our people feel safe, they feel secure, they have that sense of esteem. You have all those things in place, drug use goes down. Alcohol use goes down. And again, we're going to start that at home. And I do feel that if we start that at home and we have a strong, secure, safe Siksika, it's going to spread out. Surrounding communities, Alberta, and I'm a strong believer as far as Alberta goes, Alberta leads the country. And that's why we've shared a lot of initiatives. We've got a lot of initiatives in play with the minister, and I do thank her and her team for working with Siksika on mutual beneficial. These aren't just one-sided relationships. These are relationships that are helping all of Alberta and all of Canada. So, again, we look forward to this treatment center. We do think it's one big major step towards helping our people safe and helping the rest of Alberta being safe. So thank you, Premier, and thank you, Minister, and the rest of your ministry as we move forward for a brighter Siksika and a brighter Alberta. Thank you.
Said Chief.
Thanks so much. Well said, Chief. And now we'll sign the MOU.
I'm going to move these out of the way here. Oh, wonderful. Thanks, Chief. It's going to be good.
Perfect. We'll now get into our media Q&A here for just taking questions in person. We have a mic at the back of the left to your room here. If you want to make your way towards it,
Yeah.
we'll be going with one question and one follow-up. And please state your name and outlet at the mic, please, and thank you.
Jonathan Bradley, Western Standard. You demanded an apology from CBC for their story about the Coots incident, and they issued a retraction. Why do you consider it a case closed when they didn't issue an apology?
I think that they expressed regret, which I appreciated, and I'm glad that they acknowledged that their story was incorrect. So I do feel vindicated, and I want to make sure that I have a good relationship with the media. The media has an important work to do, which is why when they make mistakes like that, they should correct them. They should correct them quickly so that the public can continue to have confidence that what they're reading is true. Because I think what happened is a lot of other media just assumed that CBC had done its due diligence, and so a lot of media compounded the error. So I think that this is just an advisory for everyone. That my only expectation is that we have fair, accurate, and balanced news coverage, and I hope that CBC does better in the future, and I'll hold them to that.
This story came out soon before the Alberta election. Do you believe it was intended to cause maximum political damage to you? Why or why not?
Well, the sad part was that when I told them that they were in error, they took so long to issue an apology and a correction. Even during the election, when it was pretty clear from the investigation that Marguerite Tressler had done, that there was no direct correspondence with my office and any Crown prosecutors. They could have chosen then to issue a correction. They chose not to. It's been 5 weeks post-election, so I suppose it's better late than never. But I think that media has to be very mindful that when they make these kinds of allegations, their story has to be fair, it has to be accurate, it has to be balanced, and when they are wrong, they need to correct quickly.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. And we'll go to our next question at the mic here.
For the Premier, Kevin from Global TV. Premier, the latest provincial EMS dispatches for opioid poisoning reached new highs in Calgary, in Calgary and Edmonton for the last week of June. What is the province's response to action plan to deal with drug poisoning now?
It is a real tragedy that we've been watching ever since fentanyl entered the streets in our province. We've seen an elevated number of overdose deaths, and Narcan is sort of the first line of defense. It seems from what our early indication is that this particular drug on the market now is mixed with a tranquilizer, and it's making Narcan less effective. And as a result, more ambulance calls are needed. So I have obviously a team that is working on this, led by Dan Williams, our Minister of Mental Health and Addiction, to see if there is anything more that we can do from a therapeutic point of view to look at this new particular combination. And this is the answer that we have. We do not believe that there is such a thing as a safe supply of opioids. We believe that we have to make sure that we have pathways for people to get out of this terrible addiction, and we're just beginning our recovery-oriented system of care. Red Deer started receiving patients in the last couple of months. I'm hopeful that with the announcement today and the others that we've done, that we'll be able to get more treatment facilities faster. But we need to get people out of this deadly addiction. Let me just see if Minister Williams wants to comment.
I'll just start by thanking all the emergency responders. They play an important and integrated role in our response in terms of healthcare, in terms of saving lives. So to each of them, I know I was speaking to one yesterday in Calgary who's asking us, please, can you do more to try and deal with this deadly disease of addiction? And that is the crisis. It's that deadly disease of addiction, and it's ravaging communities. We heard it this morning in the chief, and we hear it every day. So as the Premier said, we're looking at next steps and what to do, particularly from a therapeutic perspective. And on a long-term perspective, we need to get these recovery centers up and running. We need to continue down a recovery response. The Alberta model is not trying to hide away from this continuing growth increase of those who are addicted. And we know when someone's addicted to opioids, there are two end games, right? Tragically, there's an emergency response possibility and hopefully an overdose that results in a life saved, or there's recovery. Those are the only two out paths, and so we're going to focus on solving that problem.
Yep. And so just as a follow-up for either of you, you have heard from groups and you're specifically targeting needs that they have right now. Correct?
Pardon me, we've heard from who?
Like harm reduction and treatment groups, what they're saying, and you're going to target what their needs are right now.
Absolutely, I'm going to be attentive to the stakeholders we have. We listen regularly to those who are on the front lines, who are dealing in recovery every single day, who are dealing with this deadly disease of addiction. We're going to be very responsive to that. I'm happy to commit to that.
Thank you.
Okay. Keith Driver from 88.1 CJWE. My question is for Chief Crowfoot and Minister Willis. Can you just elaborate a little more on how these facilities between Alberta Health Services and Siksika Health Services are going to be expanding the partnership with this facility?
Sure, I'll start. So the partnership with the Memorandum of Understanding is to start the construction. We're going to have to build this facility first. 75 beds. There's going to be spots for men and women and divided proportionally according to the need that we have. And that's hopefully going to get underway so that we can start next year. There'll be some work we need to do in advance before we can sign and get it underway construction. So the operations of it afterwards are going to be integrated. We're going to work very, very closely with their public safety team behind us to make sure that this is sensitive and holistic as a response with the First Nation itself, and it's going to be blended. And it's going to be one tool in the toolbox that we'll have between the work that Alberta Health Services does, of course, a lot within that, but the entire government has lots of programming. And obviously, the details and exactly how it's going to be operated are going to be things we're going to figure out through the normal procedures as we go down the road. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Chief?
Yeah, I do. We're not going to just throw out handbook of everything that's already been in place till now. But there are things that are specific to, say, Siksika that might be uniquely different than Enoch or the Blood Tribe or Sarsi. And so it's incorporating those things. You know, the model of the X amount of days in and out obviously is not working. So, you know, we can't keep doing what's not working and expect to get results. So, you know, we're going to incorporate what we feel like are working within the current system, and then incorporate some of the traditional aspects of being a Siksika one that are hopefully going to benefit our people. And so we'll take that data, and as it goes, we'll morph it up if we have to. But you know, again, we're going to take some of the things that are working within the current system, and then some of the things that our traditional people feel like will be applicable, and we'll combine the two.
All right, thank you.
Rick Bell, Post Media. Premier, on the CBC story, as it was happening, as it was being reported, as it was being written and broadcast day after day after day, at that time, in real time, can you describe for us how you were feeling then, back then, as this was going on? Not how you're feeling now. Now you're feeling vindicated, but how did you feel when you were in the middle of the hurricane?
Well, I can tell you it wasn't just me. I mean, the CBC was defaming me. They were defaming my Premier's office staff. They were defaming the independent members of the nonpartisan public service. They were defaming the Crown prosecutors. They were causing lack of trust in the process of administration of justice. They're creating turmoil in our caucus. And they were, and I think they ultimately created distrust in the media, because the general public looked to the media as a trusted source, yes, to hold government to account, but also to be printing information that's true. And they didn't in this case, and I wish that they had corrected the record more quickly, but at least they have, and that's why I feel vindicated today.
And I'm going to sneak in, it's kind of a quick two-part, but you'll probably have very short answers for each. You know how I am, a bit sneaky. If this had not occurred, if CBC had not done what they did yesterday, were you prepared? You sent a notice of defamation. Were you prepared to go to the distance, if necessary, to get the vindication that you have now? And number two, very quickly, the NDP are still calling for an independent investigation into all of this. So if you could respond to both of those very quickly.
On the first case, I would say I'm glad it didn't come to that point. I think it's pretty clear after all of the work that we did to try to track down the false information that they reported. It's very clear they had nothing, and I'm glad that they ultimately finally recognized that, and it didn't have to go further. And I would like to reset my relationship with the CBC and all the media. As I said, I just expect fair, accurate, balanced reporting. And I don't expect it to always go our way, but I think that there has to be more balance, more fairness, and certainly facts have to be at the heart of news reporting. As for the NDP, they're clearly political, and I'll just leave it to the public to judge. But I'm focused on the things that I think Albertans want us to be focused on. This is an historic relationship that we are building and expanding with our First Nations communities. As I said before, we can't just wait for the federal government to do these important things. This is important for not only the nations within the Alberta territory, but also the broader impact to the broader community. And so these are the things that I think that government should be focused on. Something I wish that the official opposition was more focused on, and it's certainly something I believe that the public is focused on. That's where we're going to put our efforts.
Thanks, Rick. And we'll go to our next question at the mic.
Good morning. It's John from the Strathmore Times. My question is largely for Minister-in-Chief, but Premier, if you want to chime in, I'd love to hear from you. I'd like to get a sense of just, Minister, you mentioned the start of the project next year. I want to get a sense largely of if there's a rough idea when this is going to start, as far as groundbreaking and how long the project might take to complete, as well as if you could talk a little bit more about the budget for the facility.
Sure. So as Premier mentioned, it's approximately $30 million for the capital on that. And we're going to be working closely with the chief and obviously his council, particularly the Public Safety Committee on it. We're expected to begin in 2024, hopefully early 2024. Some work needs to be done in advance to be getting to the spot where we can start to break ground, make sure that moving forward in the logistical way appropriate. And normally these projects, it will depend, of course, we're going to take, as the chief said, what works. There are other facilities already underway and built, so we're going to take what we can from that, so we have as little changing as possible, but we're going to need to make sure that that works with the community, with something specific to an Indigenous community, specific to Siksika. So that could take anywhere from 12 to 18 months for it to be complete and ready to be taken over by whoever's operating it. And from there, we got right there, after that 12 to 18 months when it's complete, we have Albertans and Siksika members in treatment right away. But that starts with a smaller group. Maybe we start with just over a dozen or 20 or so, even though we can get up to 75. It's community-oriented care. So that means this is the kind of thing that scales up over time. We can't just get it to 75 right away. We need to have folks going through this program so they can shepherd others along. And there's going to be life skills that are learned in this program, financial skills. There's going to be work that they would do in the program. Of course, we're going to see them transfer out of that into work in the community, wherever they feel appropriate, wherever they decide to put down their roots. And then, of course, there's going to be support with surrounding ministries that's going to be needed. And I'm looking particularly at Minister Nixon, who's here, who's going to be looking at that transition afterwards for that housing for folks that leave these programs. So lots of integration and work needs to be done. I hope that gives you a sense of what we have in front of us as a task in the next year and a half, 2 years.
And just to add on to that, we don't want to just put the facility anywhere. Like a lot of our knowledge and a lot of our training is land-based training, and so land-based knowledge. So, we're being selective right now of where that location is going to be, because again, it's not just going to be your typical 28 days in, 28 days out. There may be some sweat lodges in that area. There may be there's holistic healing, and so not just the building itself, but where are we going to put it? And that's consultation with our technicians back home, as well as some of our traditional people. But at the same time, we have people that are needing to be in care daily, right? We have people that are passing away on a weekly basis, unfortunately. And so, we can't sit on this long. So like the minister said, we plan on having groundbreaking and ribbon cutting fully be operational year and a half, 2 years. Mm-hmm. So a fairly quick process, I think.
Yeah, and just because the chief has mentioned a couple times, I should add, we're not looking at short stays exclusively. This model of treatment allows us to have up to a year stay, which is really important for that sustained recovery afterwards, right? And these are folks often who have gone in and out, lots of other different treatments, have tried lots of other things. So that long stay on the land base with traditional healing blended in with the recovery model, that's what we're looking at. Sorry, I don't know, Premier, if you have more to add.
No, just a comment that Chief Crowfoot made when we were talking about part of the approach of building recovery communities is building recovery capacity, and why it takes so much longer is so that at the end of the process, there's a place for a person to go at the end, so that they don't go back to the habits and the behaviors that led them to addiction in the first place. And so making sure that people have access to a supportive community, a well-paying job, that's also, I think, going to be part and parcel. I don't know if you wanted to say more on that, Chief, but I thought that was important, that you're already thinking about where people are going to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So it's again, the facility itself, the program itself, that's one step. It's a big step, but that's one step, right? Like, there's other things that got to be in place. There's other opportunities that have to be created, and that's what we're going to be working towards as we're building this facility, is putting those programs in place. Because again, this isn't First Nation specific. Any treatment area, if you go back to that same environment and you don't have anything that changes other than you went through a system, chances are you'll probably go back through that system. So we want to take what we've learned from other treatment centers and say, you know what, we realize this isn't working. And so what can we do? What are opportunities we can put in place? What are other programs we can put in place that can be supportive when that person comes out, they actually have, something to do, something where to go, something, whatever that is, a skill set, whatever that may be. So those are some of the things that we're going to be working on as we're building this facility.
And just as a quick follow-up, Chief, you mentioned that you believe a strong Siksika makes a stronger Alberta. I'm just looking to get a sense of the scale of the impact that you're hoping to see through this facility and through the programs, both for the nation and for wider Alberta.
Well, I won't go into a long story, but there's a story of a guy that he said, you know what, when he was young, I'm going to change the world, right? So then he gets a little older. He says, man, the world's too big to change. I'm going to change just my country. Years go by, it's country. So I'm going to change just my province. Well, then I'm just going to change my town. So on his deathbed, he realizes, if I would have just changed me, then I would have changed my family. I would have changed my community. So that's what I'm talking about. Like, I'm not worried about changing Canada or changing the world. It's too big. If we focus on what we can do at Siksika, what can we do? And so in those partnerships, we're focusing on us. And as we focus on us, we've already have a track record of bringing in our surrounding communities. And, and Calgary and other places like that. So I strongly believe that the more we have that fix ourselves and get our foundation solid, that's gonna bleed out. That's gonna bleed out to Calgary. That's gonna bleed out to Alberta. That's gonna bleed out to Canada. So that's kind of what I meant by that. Like, I don't think we're looking at the approach of, okay, we're gonna change the world. All right, let's focus at home. Let's fix the foundation at home. And as we fix the foundation at home, that's going to spread out to our surrounding neighbors. That's going to spread out to the province. That's going to spread out to Canada.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. And we have time for one more question, so we'll go.
And with Radio-Canada RDI, I guess I've got my question and my follow-up in the same question. Part of the Alberta approach is involuntary treatment. Here we're talking about holistic approach, an approach that includes traditional way of doing things to treat addiction. So I guess my question is for both Minister Williams and Chief Crowfoot, like, how do you reconcile the two together? And would those facilities have involuntary treatment as well? And how does that approach fit with your community and the historical aspect of involuntary treatment and being put in facility without consent?
Well, let me start by talking about the proposal that we're exploring for having treatment orders. We already have that for young people, and we do also have, through the Mental Health Act, the ability to order somebody who's at risk to themselves or others into a facility for a limited period of time in order to get the treatment that they need. There are processes in place that require a judge to issue the order, and that's, we want to make sure that that all the legalities are followed. So it'll take us a little bit of time to develop that legislation for the framework, but that would be the notion behind it, is that we're looking more at the kind of model that we see in Portugal, where there are dissuasion commissions, where a person who is repeatedly overdosing, repeatedly committing crimes to support themselves, repeatedly causing harm to others, have the ability to come forward to a panel, to be encouraged to go into a treatment, and at some point will get to a point where family, police officers, doctors will say, we'll go to court to achieve a treatment order. It's not the first resort, it's the last resort, because as I think Dan said very well, that there really are only two pathways. One leads to devastation, the other leads to recovery. And the sooner we can get people on the pathway to recovery, the sooner we can get their lives back. I should also mention Dan speaks French, so if you need it en français as well,
yeah, we'll
he can
do
that afterwards
after
as well. But no, I just wanted to frame that out.
Yeah.
Thank you for volunteering.
Well, you were our parliamentary secretary for Francophonie, so I wanted to make sure you got some practice in. But so our approach would be that I don't want anybody to think that this is a single approach. It's a recovery-oriented system. It's a system by nature. One part of the system is making sure that people have immediate access to 211 so that they can call and get same-day counseling. Making sure that there is no cost when they do get a treatment bed. That's why we removed the $40. The additional is the virtual opioid dependency program. So people can call in and get a drug that will allow them to immediately replace their dependence on opioids. We can do that right now as well. Then on top of that, expanding the number of beds that we have, and this aspect that we're announcing today is partnering with First Nations so that we can build out the recovery communities. And the final step will be, if none of that works, and we do have somebody who is repeatedly causing harm to themselves or others, to create a mechanism for a treatment order. Dan?
Sure, I think the Premier put it very well. The truth is we have a crisis with this deadly disease of addiction that's ravishing communities, and we're called to act. Of course we are, and that's why we have this entire Alberta model that has recovery at the center of it. And we have other acts that give us an idea of what this could look like. You look at PCHAD, as the Premier mentioned, for youth, or we look at the Mental Health Act. And that important legal requirement that I want to focus this around, and there'll be lots of exploring as we go, is that harm to yourself or others, right? And so there's an idea of where that can come from. This isn't novel in our societies. We have lots of tools in our toolbox to try and deal with this. A lot of it hasn't been working. I don't believe the right spot for somebody in crisis with an addiction is a jail cell. I don't think that kind of involuntary locking them up is the right way to deal with this problem. I don't think that's compassionate. I don't think it's compassionate to leave these people on the street sidewalk where every family member I've met in my short 2 weeks of this role are begging me, please, can we please deal with these people? Can we help my family members somehow get help, right? That's compassionate. So with substantive oversight, with the right legal requirements, with not the criminal justice system, but a civil court, and as a last resort, as the Premier said, I think this is the response that a compassionate society takes to what is ravaging our communities.
But there is a sensibility doing that in a First Nation and forcing people into treatment, and that's kind of where I kind of wanted you to address. And Chief Crowfoot, I'd like to hear you on that as well.
Well, before I hand it over to the Chief, the way it's being discussed around the table when we talk about it is that the dissuasion commissions would have two arms, that if a person is non-Indigenous, it would be non-Indigenous panelists who are holding them to account. If they are Indigenous, it would be Indigenous elders who are assisting in holding them to account. Every part of what we want to do is going to be culturally sensitive and make sure that it's appropriate to the community. Chief?
Yeah, I'm not going to speak from an Indigenous, because when you say Indigenous, there's 600 nations across Canada. But in Siksika, our way is more extreme than what they're mentioning. Our way is to intervene. Our way is to, as a community raises a child. We're not raised to sit back and to let somebody self-destruct. Our ways are to pull them in and to say, you know what, Niskani, or, what's going on. So, our way is to intervene. If I had my son out doing stuff that he shouldn't be doing, I just can't just let him keep doing it. I have to pull him in and say, hey, what's going on? So that very well is our way, and I think we've gotten away from that as a society. I don't want to go too far down a philosophical standpoint here, but we've kind of, as a society, said, you know what, everybody can do what they want to do, and there's no accountability. And as a result of no accountability, there's no consequences. We live in a world of no consequences because nobody wants to be offended, and that's a problem. So at Siksika, we didn't worry about if Johnny was offended. We're worrying about, you know what, Johnny, you're disrupting yourself. We need to help you to help yourself. So a lot of times, when we had the earlier press conference right before the election, the two young ladies that stood up, they were thankful for that intervention by their family, because when they're in that state of mind, that's not Johnny. That's not Susie. Their mind is taken over by a drug. And so, if me as a chief or us as a council, we know somebody's, suffering from that and habitually suffering from that, why would we stand back and go, oh, well, that's Johnny's choice? And then we go to Johnny's funeral and go, oh, we should have done something. So we want to be able to do something before we're going to funerals. I would much rather visit Johnny in the rehab center than in the morgue. And so, again, I'm not going to speak for Indigenous people, but for Siksika, our way is to intervene. Our way is to pull somebody in, even at the society level, and we won't get into that, but that's the role of the elders. That's why we always include elders, because that's the teachings of the elders, is to be able to pull each one in and say, hey, you're messing up. As chief of Siksika in Blackfoot, it's Nina, which is the father. So, and Ninakes, we're the fathers of our people. So even though somebody might be years older than me, I have the role of the father of the people. So I'm supposed to grab that person and say, hey, Johnny, what's going on? So that's our role. That's Siksika way, is to intervene. And especially if somebody that is having a habitual issue and habitual harm to themselves or to the community, we want to, again, you talk about holistic. How is that not holistic? We're trying to make the community whole. And if we have people that are individuals that are harming themselves and harming the community, why would we just sit back and go, well, that's Johnny's choice? They're not just harming them. When somebody overdoses and dies of an overdose, that person is not the only person that got harmed. Their mom, their father, their family, their best friends, their whole family, a whole community is affected by that. So for us to just sit back and go, well, that's Johnny's choice. Well, to a point, it's not. To a point, it's the communities. And it's the onus of the people to say, and so if you go back traditionally, that's what we traditionally did. We traditionally pulled people in and said, I see you're going down a path that maybe be the self-destructive. So let's help out with this. And so this is some of the ways that we have at Siksika, and these are some of the programs that we're going to institute. Now, like the Premier said, we're not just going to grab people off the street and just throw them in like it's jail, but, we have programs already at Siksika, Escabimo Geeks, which was mediation and those kind of things. So we already have some of these programs in place. So that's been our way for a long time. It's always been our way to help when we see somebody going astray, to try to pull that person back in. You go, if you pull them back in right off the bat, then it's easier to bring them back in. But if you wait till they're way out of alignment, it's a lot harder to bring them back into alignment. So, and again, it's not my job. It's our job as the community. As when you talk about holistic, that's the whole community. The community raises the person kind of concept.
And
we are running up to time, so we have time for a follow-up. So I think that's where we're going to end it, unless Premier or Minister want to jump in really quickly.
Well, maybe you can, if you need anything in French, maybe you can get Dan afterwards.
Afterwards.
You got it.
Sure.
Thanks, everyone.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.